Ladies and gentlemen, the intro video was not rolled this week. We've lost access to it for this week. We have no idea how this happened, but it will be back next week. But we are here to get this show on the road in more ways than one. The Iceman is here, as always, to introduce us in. And for now, I'm only joined by another third of our troublesome triumvirate. We may have the last third coming in here on the show at some point in the near-distant future. TBD on that. But joining me on this one, a special audio-only edition, because road safety is a must. The traveling podcaster, the podfather himself. Rick, how we doing?
You know, I feel like I'm going back down to Baltimore all over again, like I did one of the last times that I was in the car for the road, or it was that Baker Mayfield trip where I was driving back from work in the rain, through Jones Beach. That was a lot of fun.
Yes.
Yeah, not often that I get to do this. Obviously, if I have my own car, I'm able to, pot myself up so I can, be on video while I'm driving. But have the wife's car today. It's beautiful, by the way, but don't have the pot to put the phone up. So this is what you get, people. So enjoy it.
Rick, out of curiosity, and this also brings up the question of your car. Like I've seen cars like people have like pine freshener or stuff in there. But between you and the wife's car, do you guys have like that kind of stuff? And if you do, what's the difference? Do you guys have the same like air and scent, or do you go different style for that?
No, much like everything in life, and this is not a knock on anybody. My wife likes the simple pleasures and the simple things, where I go a little off the beaten path quite frequently. So currently in her car right now, we have a Little Trees lavender air freshener, which you'd probably find in like a Target or anything like that. Whereas if it was my car, I would probably have like one of the Yankee Candle ones you get in the car wash, but I buy like 4 of them at a time because, I change the scents quite frequently just because, my mood, One week I'll have like the bourbon and the oak and it's really good, and the next week I'm like, no, I want strawberry, So I randomize it because I never like to do the same thing twice.
If the programs that we have here, if the mind-blowing fact is any indication, the Podfather loves the beaten path more than anything else, ladies and gentlemen.
I mean, yes, that's an accurate statement.
So we have a good little show here for you guys today. Like we said last week, we are going to go back to that a little bit of more so focused on like highlights of each week of the season as we are going closer and closer to the big shabam itself, the postseason. But we did get a little bit of interesting news this week that Rick and I will be able to sink our teeth into and discuss, because Rick, a team has already confirmed there's definitely going to be a new starting quarterback in town next season for a certain football team that operates in the Northeast, to say the very least. And there might be, to be fair, there could be a second team in that same metro area that also gets a new quarterback for all that we know. We'll discuss that here a little bit in the show. But before we get to that, even though our games master Justin is not here, I decided I was thinking of things. I was pontificating, as some would say, and I came up with a mini edition of Fact or Fiction that we could briefly discuss just the concept of here, Rick, before we get to the main topics here on the show. And this is what I thought, Rick. And obviously this is in reference to a game that was played earlier this week. Rick, fact or fiction, in your opinion, will Jameis Winston be a starting quarterback for a team in the 2025 season? And I'll be more specific, to begin the 2025 season. So game 1 of 2025.
At the start of it, you're saying, okay.
Yes.
So you mean he's going to go into week 1 as the starter on somebody's roster is what you're asking me?
Yes.
This is a good one. If there were more franchises, I would say this is a 100% slam dunk fact, but you got to think about it that there's only 32 franchises. So that means there's 32 starting quarterbacks week 1. Is Jameis Winston among the top 32? He's playing pretty well. Don't get me wrong. He's leading the Browns, kind of back into, I don't want to say relevancy, but like he's getting their dignity back in some ways. And to be fair, he has wins over the top 2 teams in this division, which is a lot more than Joe Burrow can say for himself, I believe, at the moment. So,
very true.
Yeah, how about that? I'm going to say fiction only because I think that the teams that are looking for a quarterback in the draft are not going to touch the money when it comes to Jameis Winston with regards to, a starting quarterback QB1. Because I don't see him in the role of a Jacoby Brissett or a Sam Darnold who can win the job from a rookie quarterback in training camp and then, kind of yield the reins in the next 3 or 4 weeks after they start. Darnold, hasn't done that yet because McCarthy's been out. But you saw in New England that Brissett held down the fort for a couple weeks, and then Drake May was given the opportunity to start. In Chicago, the clamoring for Tyson Bagent kind of went nowhere because Caleb Williams was the number one guy. And again, Washington, they wanted the new quarterback so bad they got rid of Sam Howell, who they drafted a couple of years or even a year prior to Jaden Daniels getting in here. So for the rest of the teams that are looking for a free agent quarterback, I think Jameis Winston might not be on the top of their list. But again, it's the question of whether these teams have a capable or a young enough backup. I mean, I'll give you a prime example here. I would have thought that Atlanta, if they hadn't drafted Michael Penix, might have been in the market to get a veteran backup QB to back up Kirk Cousins, knowing his injury history. But they drafted Michael Penix at 8 this year, so that means that they're with him. They're on that team. They're on that campaign. So for me, I'm going to say it's a fiction right now. I wouldn't be surprised if a team takes a flyer on him and he is a QB2 again and competes for the starting job in training camp in 25, but I just don't see a pathway at the moment, at least, for him to be a QB1 at the start of next season.
Right, and I definitely don't blame you either. I think it would take a very certain set of circumstances to occur for famous Jameis himself to be starting for a team here day one of 2025. But like you said, he is Jameis has easily played himself, Rick, into that area where the former high pick, he was the first overall pick in his draft, probably never going to live up to that ideal draft selection of his, but he's going to play himself into a very long career as a reliable backup, can come in, be a spot starter. And there's a number of teams that could use that, even teams that maybe have necessarily paid their franchise future quarterback, but are going to need a guy like Jameis to be the backup. To me, the team that screams out to me immediately, and this would be him returning to the Sunshine State, the Jacksonville Jaguars. If Trevor Lawrence is going to be getting injured, Mac Jones isn't good enough to be a backup quarterback.
Mac Jones is going to be a starting quarterback, and New England found that out very quickly. And why is that, jerk? Let's tell the people why.
Well, there's a million reasons. Bill O'Brien, Bailey Zappi should have been the guy.
What's the obvious reason, though?
Bill Belichick is washed? I don't know.
Mac Jones is the first-round pick out of Alabama.
Yes, you're right. That's very true. If he was a second-round pick, though, he would have had a chance, Rick.
Like Brian Branch.
Exactly. So it's very telling. But famous Jameis is definitely guaranteed position for himself. The teams are going to be inquiring his services this offseason. And it might honestly force the Browns even to have to consider paying him a decent chunk of change if they want to keep him, because we know Deshaun is hurt. We're assuming he's going to start next season, be ready, I should say, to start next season. If he is, he's going to be starting, because you don't sit $46 million quarterbacks, guys. Well, maybe you do, and then you make him play fourth string safety, and then you eventually cut him. But, semantics.
Well, so, to your point, though, that's actually a very interesting discussion to be had, though, because is Watson going to really be ready by week 1 next year? That injury is pretty catastrophic for him. And, I know he's young. I know he can heal up pretty easily. But, look at that injury, a non-contact injury like that. Look at how long it took other guys to come back fully from that sort of an injury. So, that might be the best option. I mean, if the Browns end up, with 6 wins, let's say, at the end of this year, if they end up, 6-11 or even 7-10 with Winston firmly at the helm, there's a good possibility they'll bring him back. I think you're right. I think that's the best option, because he's going to command money at other places, but he's familiar with Cleveland. He's doing very well there. I think the fans love him there, which is interesting, because of his checkered history as well. But he's redeemed himself. This is a story about reclamation projects, and I think that if he wants to stay in Cleveland and Cleveland wants him back, then that's a pretty good match made in heaven. Again, I think he'd rather stay with the familiarity of it than try his hand at being a possible QB1 somewhere else and just watching it kind of go away when the next young big thing comes in.
Yeah, and that consistency as well, so being able to stay in an organization, which, for Jameis, for as funny as it is to point out, he's actually, like, for being a backup quarterback now ever since his season in Tampa ended, familiarity has kind of been his game because he was in New Orleans for 4 seasons. He didn't bounce around, so
Yeah.
It honestly says a lot for Jameis how he's endured so far ever since his time as a consistent starting QB has ended. And you're right, I think it really would just be a logical thing. He was signed to a 1-year deal by Cleveland, and it's looking like it was a really good choice to only be signed to a 1-year deal because backup quarterbacks, Rick, like in this economy, they still get paid a decent chunk of change.
Absolutely. I mean, until he retired, I think Chase Daniel was the most well-paid backup quarterback in NFL history. Backing up Mahomes and backing up Stafford in LA for what he was doing. I think he was paying maybe like $47 million over his career to be a backup quarterback and barely see the field. Where's that money for me? I want that money.
Seriously, but we'll see famous Jameis resetting the backup market, one start and one contract at a time. So it's good. It'll be interesting, but it was a nice little thought experiment that I thought to myself. It's like, will famous Jameis get that opportunity? Because we know, there's, we talked about Sam Darnold, Rick, earlier in the season, and the hype around Sam Darnold has most definitely slowed down ever since the beautiful first couple of weeks he and the Minnesota Vikings had. But he still played at a relatively decent level, not at the same clip he did to start the year, but he's still respectable, top 5 in passing touchdowns, top half of the league in yards. Teams are going to inquire about his services, or maybe, again, I don't know if he signed for a 1 or 2 year deal in Minnesota as well, but maybe he just stays there. But we know Minnesota's future eventually is with their young quarterback, right? So it's going to be interesting to see what all occurs there. Some backup quarterbacks on the market here following the 2024 season. And, Rick, there's been another quarterback that'll be hitting the market that teams can, they can sign him right away if they think that they can figure him into the plans for the future. We mentioned Jameis Winston, we mentioned Sam Darnold, Rick, 2 former top highly drafted players who didn't work well with their original teams. The difference is that their teams cut bait with them before the ends of their rookie contracts, or let their rookie contracts expire and then allowed them to walk. The guy we're about to talk about got paid, got a healthy contract extension. Mobility, jobability, and something else. Mobility, jobability, and other ability ?
Well, I know what it is, but this is a family-friendly show, and I don't want the headline to be my first, potential naughty word. So, yeah,
that's fair. Speaking of which, mobility, jobability, and needability, because someone's going to Joe-bility, Daniel-bility, interception-bility. No, we're just making jokes at this point. Daniel Jones and the New York Giants, ladies and gentlemen, mutually agreed to part ways earlier this week. This is very interesting. So within the last week or so, it was actually, earlier this week, November 18th, he was benched in favor of our guy, Rick, Tommy the Paisan. Tom DeVito. So Tommy Cutlets is going to be starting in New York again. Shout out to Drew Lock for being patient. I hope he does get another start or 2 before the season's over. And then several days after that, on November 22nd, so literally yesterday, Jones asked to be released by the Giants, and a request was granted by owner and president John Mara. In a statement that confirmed the decision, Mara said, we hold Daniel in high regard and have a great appreciation for him. We wish him nothing but the best in the future. About 6 years, not a full 6 seasons, but 6 seasons in New York, 24, 44, and 1 record as a starter, lowest win percentage among quarterbacks with at least 50 starts since the 2019 season, and also recorded the lowest touchdown percentage among QBs with at least 1,000 pass attempts in the span as well. Worth noting, 70 career passing touchdowns, 47 career interceptions, 15 career rushing touchdowns. But also 26 lost fumbles as well. So let's get a little bit closer on both ends, right, in terms of total offensive production and interceptions. Danny Dimes devalued. Now, Rick, this is interesting because Daniel Jones has been a key figure in discussions in this podcast, with us having talked about the Giants multiple times, whether it was their surprise season they had in the first season of this podcast existence, right, with defeating the Minnesota Vikings in the postseason, and we christened him then Danny Dollars instead of just Danny Dimes. him getting that big contract extension, which at the time I was very much like, what are you doing? They believed in him over Saquon, considering who they gave the long-term contract extension to. Obviously, he was drafted 6th overall. What a interesting tenure it was in New York for Daniel Jones. I'm kind of all over the place, but it starts with him being drafted 6th overall, right, Rick? Out of the draft. He was not projected to go that high. He was not a projected first-round pick. I think looking back, his draft projection was somewhere in the 3rd round. But the Giants elect to take him in the 6th, or with the 6th overall pick, not in the 6th round. Daniel Jones actually would have been worth it if he was a 6th round pick, realistically. Yep. But he was drafted 6th overall. Eventually gets the start about 4 or 5 games into his rookie campaign. Flashes a little bit of the potential. Did not have a bad rookie season. You know, when you look back at it historically and compare it to his later years in the league, 24 passing touchdowns, 12 interceptions for a little over 3,000 passing yards, and 2 touchdowns on the ground. So he had a little bit of decent production there, right? It gives you hope. It's like, okay, maybe there's the rough rookie mistakes, but he had a decent year, got over 60% completion. There's something there. And that something quickly became, oh dear God. The next 2 seasons were marred by just a lot of inconsistency, bad performances, getting sacked plenty, to say the very least. In 2020, he was sacked 45 times, which didn't lead the league from what I'm seeing, but it had to have been close, considering it's Bolden from what I'm seeing. Production didn't go as well. 2022, Rick, Brian Daboll is the New York Giants' new head coach. And immediately things are different. Daniel Jones is throwing less interceptions. He's not making as many mistakes. 2022 is actually the peak of his rushing production. He had 7 rushing touchdowns for himself on the year. The Giants make the postseason. Daboll's coach of the year. The Giants, they were these 4th quarter comeback kings that season. And everything falls apart the next 2 years. Tenuous, to say the very least. Rick, we could obviously look at this from both ways. I think we will just cover it from both sides of it, Daniel Jones' side and the Giants' side. So I will give it to you on which side you want to take on. But Rick, the Daniel Jones tenure in New York, your thoughts on it, and now the fallout of this decision.
Well, I don't want to say that I expected this to happen, because I don't think I expected the swift fall to happen so swiftly. But let's take it back to what his draft night. The Giants had 3 picks in the 1st round based upon moving up, trades, and everything else. And of those 3 guys, I mean, Deontay Banks has kind of been. Oh no, wait, it wasn't him. It was DeAndre Baker. He was awful. So DeAndre Baker was terrible. So he got out of the league. Dexter Lawrence has been the cornerstone of that defense. But Daniel Jones was the real question mark because, you know, like you said, they drafted the kid really highly out of a school that wasn't really known for producing quarterbacks. The only reason I think why the Giants brass wanted him was because of the head coach connection, because David Cutcliffe, who was the head coach of Duke, was the quarterback whisperer for Eli Manning. So therefore, you know, try and catch lightning in the bottle again. It didn't work. And part of it is Jones's fault, because, you know, by this point, by 6 years in, you've got to be making better decisions. But also, to be fair, you know, he wasn't given a fair hand because he never really had a great offensive line to work with. He had some weaponry here and there, but never had a full arsenal of talent around him. I mean, we can make all the gestures in the world about how bad 22 was from a talent standpoint. Those guys, the no-names, stepped up huge. Like, Isaiah Hodgins became a star until he fumbled twice. Richie James was coming out of nowhere. Daniel Bellinger was a big tight end for them, you know, coming out of nowhere basically. And they had Saquon, but they also had Matt Breida and Gary Brightwell. So they had options to help out, but it was literally the novelty of no one knows what Daboll's offense is. Jones is not throwing the ball that much because he's running it, and he's actually doing better until he's, you know, tripping himself out of his own feet. So that was the big problem there too. But it was never consistent enough. And that, I think, was the ultimate death knell, was that, you know, when push came to shove, the Giants stuck with Daniel Jones and gave him the extension because they believed in that, that mantra of the running backs age faster, and if you pay a running back a ton of money, he might not do well. Now, again, Daniel Jones was never behind a very good offensive line. He was behind an okay offensive line most of the time, but the rest of the time he was behind barn doors that opened up wildly whenever he had the ball in his hands. So his injuries, kind of make sense when you look at that. And again, a lot of his interceptions were because, Kenny Golladay was a joke of a signing for them. He did nothing for them. And again, when that's your number one guy and he turns into nothing, and then Sterling Shepard gets hurt a bunch, and Darius Slayton doesn't prove to be as big a key as you thought he was going to be, his tenure was mired in problems. And it's hard to say that anybody who gets into that system can conjure up magic and, have it be consistent. And so I think he was doomed from the start, Daniel Jones. And I feel like we're at a point now where we knew it was coming. It just, again, the precipitous fall of it is a bit stunning to me that after all of that, after all the grandiose gestures of we're keeping him, here's the money, sign the contract, now it's get off our team and go somewhere else. So I feel for the kid. I mean, I think he wanted to stay. But when you get knocked down to, when you get put behind Tim Boyle, your career's over. I'm sorry to say it.
Yeah, it's tumultuous to say the very least what happened there at the end with Jones and the lumps he's taken along the way. Like you said, I think it is a case of both. You could look at Daniel Jones and you just look at it as the fact of at the end of the day he just never developed, and it didn't feel like he necessarily picked up all the intricacies needed to be a consistent and really good NFL starting quarterback. But you pointed out some of the facts there, and I think I mentioned it, but it's still worth noting. He never should have been taken 6th overall. That should have never happened.
Yeah.
But you mentioned it, Rick, the connection of Giants brass at the time with his college coach,
Yep.
and Eli and that whole thing, it clouded a lot of people. And Dave Football Gettleman was the man that was the GM at the time, and just that's one of those selections where it's just like, oh, you could have made a lot better of a selection there, to say the very least. It wasn't a banner Pro Bowl selection in any way, shape, or form at all.
Dirk, I'm curious to know, since I'm on the road and since I know you can look this up, who are the next 3 quarterbacks taken after Daniel Jones?
I can point that out for you here in a moment. I actually have the draft looked up, so I just need to filter it for myself by QBs taken. So, as we've established, Daniel Jones was taken 6 overall. He was the second quarterback selected in that draft, because remember, that was the Kyler Murray draft in 2019. So Kyler was first. Daniel Jones was 6th. 15th, Dwayne Haskins.
Okay.
42nd, Drew Lock.
Interesting.
And then 100th overall, Will Greer, followed by 104th overall, Ryan Finley.
Okay. So what that tells you and what that tells me is that this was not a strong quarterback class at all.
Yeah. And the 3 notable names I'm seeing that have started a bit in the NFL after Daniel Jones was selected, they're not top flight players, however. In I think it was a 6th or 7th round pick, our guy, Gardner Minshew.
Yep.
And then 2 undrafted players, Rick. Well, technically 3 if you count David Blau, but I'm not counting him. There's also Brett Rippon. But no, the guys I was looking at was Jake Browning, who we know spots started a little bit for the Cincinnati Bengals when Joe Burrow got hurt. And Rick, you know this name. Quack. Duck Hodges. Have I lost the Podfather with a Duck Hodges reference, ladies and gentlemen? I might have, to say the very least. But yes, so it was clearly not a quarterback draft as we were going down that road for. And to say the bare minimum, it wasn't great. And you're looking at the Giants at the time going into the 2019. Wow. Oh, we got you back, Rick. Did you hear my Duck Hodges reference? ladies and gentlemen, we may have lost correspondence with the Podfather. This is this war right here, to say the very least. But no, so as the road that Rick was going down there before getting to the ultimate exclamation point of, you know what, not a good quarterback class in 2019. And if you're the Giants, it's one of those sad things where it's like they very much vehemently drafted for need there in a situation where you look at a team entering 2019. There was still the all-time leader, the up for Hall of Fame selection committee man himself. There was Eli Manning, and ultimately, at the very end of his career, that's what we had in New York at that time. So one could make the argument they needed a quarterback, but did you need a 6th overall pick badly in that kind of draft class? I don't know about that. So, Rick, your point that you were getting to before you were cut off.
Come on.
Well, we heard you there.
The problem with Suffolk County is that when you're driving through it, you got a lot of wooded areas. So give me a minute.
No, you're good. You're good.
I will say this to you, that look, not a good quarterback draft class at all for them. And an interesting move for the Giants to go with DeVito instead of Locke.
Yeah.
I don't understand it. I really don't understand that. I know. What are you trying to prove? That's my question. What are you trying to prove here? You know?
They really just don't like the 2019 draft class of guys. They don't want the guy they drafted. They don't want the backup quarterback they have from that draft class either, it seems.
Well, and that also leads me to my other point, too, in that it feels a little bit like the Giants are now in the market for drafting a quarterback this year, right?
Yep.
But is this quarterback class any good?
It's a lot. You know what? That's a really good point. I will say real quick, just for the context, real quick, when it comes to Daniel Jones, we mentioned 2019, and if people are going to argue, well, all the Giants would have had in 2019 is Eli, and we saw how Eli started that year. He started out terribly. 2020 was the next draft year, and yes, the pandemic and everything happened eventually, but Rick, 2020, we know this draft class. 1st overall, Joe Burrow. 5th overall, Tua. 6th overall, Herbert. And later on in the draft, late in the 1st round, Jordan Love. And in the 2nd round, Jalen Hurts.
Yep.
Giants had the 4th overall pick in that draft. If you reverse course in 2019 and you actually look at offensive line for yourself, or even defensive line, and I know he's no longer on his team, but Jonah Williams was the 11th overall pick in 2019. Chris Lindstrom, who's become one of the best guards in the league, was drafted there. Like, if you go offensive line instead of quarterback there, man, you could have had your guy right now. But
I do agree with that. I will defend them picking O-line, though, because Andrew Thomas, until he got hurt, has become a real star for them.
That's true.
So that part I'm a little more forgiving because of how good Andrew Thomas has been. But you're right. If you just reverse them, maybe the Giants that year, maybe they have the number one pick, and maybe they take Joe Burrow. Oh God, Joe Burrow in a Giants uniform. Oh boy.
How different that would have been, right? How different. And you mentioned, Rick, I mean, we're not going to get into a deep dive. We're not going to get into a deep dive here, but just notable names that are going to be coming out for this draft class, right? It's Carson Beck out of Georgia. It's Shador Sanders out of Colorado. It's Quinn Ewers of Texas. And it's Jalen Milroe of Alabama. Those are like the top 4 names that people are going to project in the 1st round for this upcoming draft.
Yeah, I've seen Cam Ward out of Miami too. But again, like the way you could tell that a college quarterback class is not going to be very good. None of those guys. Maybe Cam Ward's the only one. None of those guys are in Heisman consideration at all. It's all about Travis Hunter and all about Ashton Genty. It's not any quarterback is in consideration for this award at all this year.
Yeah. It says a lot about an upcoming year.
Let me ask you a question. Let me ask you this: how refreshing is that? because we're in the NFL, it's all about quarterback this, quarterback that. But the top award in college is not going to go to one this year.
Yeah, it's beautiful. It's beautiful, to say the very least. Actually, I want to look that up real quick. I want to see how the consistency of the Heisman Trophy the last couple of years and like who it's been going to in terms of position wise. Because I gotta say, for myself, I am not that good at like remembering Heisman Trophy winners off the top of my head, like I am Formula One World Drivers champions, to say the very least. Not my area of expertise.
You would remember those more easily, yes.
So the last 2 years have been quarterbacks. Or last 3 years actually have been QBs. Jaden Daniels, Caleb Williams, Bryce Young. Before them, Devontae Smith. Then you had Burrow, Kyler, Baker, Lamar. Then, God, there are actually a lot more quarterbacks than I was thinking here. It's really the 2000s. There was a lot of a few more skill position players winning it slightly. Reggie Bush was there. What a time! Mark Ingram.
Yep.
Need more skill position players winning the Heisman. We don't care about these quarterbacks. We do not care.
No, for sure. And again, just to put a final ball on it too, if you're the Giants, you got rid of Saquon Barkley. You brought in Devin Singletary, who hasn't been living up to the hype. And the guy you drafted in the 5th round, Tyrone Tracy, has been more the guy that you've been relying on. So clearly, on all accounts here, the Giants made a huge mistake in putting the money to Jones and not to Barkley.
Yeah, just to show, man. We have several cases where we can look at it and talk about it. There is, just because you don't want to pay him and you could get similar production out of a different guy you pay less. Talent. There's a big talent discrepancy between running backs, man. There's just that big talent discrepancy between what Saquon's doing and Devin Singletary, what Dalvin Cook did in his Vikings career versus what has followed him. There's levels to the running back position. There's levels. Yeah. Ask Tennessee Titans fans how they feel about Pollard this season compared to when they had Derrick Henry.
Sure. So actually, it's interesting you brought up the Titans, because I don't know if this is going to be the next transition, but where is Daniel Jones going to go now?
That is 100% where I was going to go next. Rick, you're reading my mind. We can't see you, but we already know we're still lockstep in it. It doesn't matter if he's traveling hundreds of miles away, ladies and gentlemen. To be fair, it's a local travel for the Podfather today. But that was my next question, Rick. So we talked about the Giants' perspective. We know they're going to go quarterback in this next draft. It's going to just be what quarterback do they draft and how high will they draft them? Oh, take notes, New York. Take notes. But Daniel Jones, we just talked about where Jameis could go. What about Daniel Jones? What are we thinking of Daniel Jones here, Rick? Where could he end up?
So it's funny you brought up Tennessee, because I think that could be a good landing spot for him, just to kind of reset himself. I know that the Titans have Will Levis, but that hasn't done well enough, and they've gone to Mason Rudolph, which, the minute you go to Mason Rudolph, your season's over. Anyone knows that. So I think that could be a good spot for him. I know they got rid of Hopkins. I know there's some weapons that are there, but again, I think for Daniel Jones, it's got to be a fresh start and a fresh change of pace. That's why I'm thinking AFC primarily. I know there's talk about him going to Carolina because he's from Charlotte. That would be homecoming for him, and that would be easy for him to do. But there's nothing that I wish less on anybody in the world than to go play for David Tepper. So if I can avoid that at all costs, I avoid that at all costs. So I would think my top two, honestly, Tennessee is an outside pick, but I think Vegas is a good spot too for him. Because the Raiders, again, Gardner Minshew or Aiden O'Connell, it seems like the answer is no. So give a third option there, and maybe, let's see if Daniel Jones can make Brock Bowers into an all-world tight end as good as he's been this year, if he can try to make him better, rely on that, because one of the keys for Daniel Jones has been relying on those tight ends, to kind of be there to catch the ball for him. Again, in the year that they went to the playoffs and did really well, the big key was Daniel Bellinger. That was their big target. So, if they can go if he can go to a spot where there's a good tight end in place already, and I know Tennessee has Okonkwo, so if he continues to develop, he could be a good guy too. So I think one of those two spots are a good landing spot for him. I know everybody wants him to go to Dallas because of the story that is, but I just don't think that's going to happen. So right. I pick Tennessee or Vegas as my top two spots for him.
And there's no real incentive for Dallas to just pick up Daniel Jones for the last couple games. Like, they have Cooper Rush. And if anything, if they're going to give a young quarterback a chance to start some games, it's probably going to be Trey Lance.
Right.
So yeah, no, I'm with you. As funny as the story would be, no reason for the Cowboys to just randomly pluck Daniel Jones off the street and have him start. It's not going to be him. It's going to be other guys, and we will see who it is. I think Titans and Raiders probably is the most logical thing, all things considered. Rick.
I did see, Jerk, and it might have been an article by the same guy that we trashed from CBS, that article weeks ago. It might have been by him. But one of the options that was in that article that I saw, which I thought was really interesting, was the Chargers. Because apparently, according to them, Justin Herbert needs a good backup. Because I guess it's what, Easton Stick?
Yeah, I believe so.
So, okay. So, instead of being a QB1 somewhere, Daniel Jones is going to be backing up a guy who will never let him see the field ever again, in Herbert.
Yeah. And by the way, Easton Stick also from that 2019 draft class.
Oh, yeah.
That 2019 draft class, aside from Kyler Murray, there are no good quarterbacks in that draft.
Oh, yeah. No good ones at all. Oh, that's bad.
God. That's brutal. That's brutal to say the very least. So, we've talked about it from both ends. Danny Dimes, from Danny Dimes to Danny Dollars, back to Danny Dimes to Danny Devalued, is no longer going to be playing in the Big Apple. Could another New York football quarterback be off of this team by season's end? Who knows? We will. I think it's more fun if we discuss that when all three of us are here. Honestly, all things considered. So we'll table that discussion.
Yeah, I mean, listen. I think. My perspective, and I think Justin's more of a defender of Aaron than I am. But yeah, I think if all three of us are in town, it's gonna be a lot more fun to discuss that with all three of us here. Yeah.
Yes, absolutely. So we're gonna move on to the stories and observations that we're going to be pointing out in Week 11 that will seep over a little bit into Week 12. Rick, I think we should just hit on the biggest thing because we went over it just before we went live, and I think this is very much a point to go over because this team, high expectations coming into the season. I know I'm really, really slimming the field down there, but this team is now currently 5-5. Rick, they are 1-3 in their division matchups. Their star pass rusher and their starting quarterback are missing this upcoming week's game against the Green Bay Packers. Rick, the San Francisco 49ers their season, it looks like it might be hanging on by a thread here the next 2 to 3 weeks. Brandon Allen is going to be starting for them. We searched up for it, I think a career starting record of 2-7 going into this weekend. No Nick Bosa. Of course, they lost Brendan Ayuk earlier in the season for the remainder of the year. It feels like every single skill position player on that team has landed on a questionable list at some point. Rick, how do the San Francisco 49ers this week salvage this season?
I don't know if you can. I mean, one of the things we've talked about year in and year out with not just the Niners, with the Ravens, is the team has all this talent and they can be really good, but the thing that slows them down is the injury bug. And it seems like San Francisco gets bit by it every single year in the worst possible way. I mean, look at last year with the Super Bowl, with Dre Greenlaw getting hurt the way that he did. He was running onto the field from the sideline, and the turf monster got him. He was out for the remainder of the game. Now, would that have changed anything if he had been on the field? Yeah, I think so. I think they would have beaten the Chiefs. I think they would have won that game, and then Taylor and Travis would have broken up afterwards. Maybe that would have happened. You never know. But I don't know if you can save the season. If it's just like for a game or two, you might be able to be okay without having Purdy and Bosa there. But if you're telling me that Brandon Allen's going to be your starter the rest of the season, just pack it up, because you mentioned Ayuk being hurt. Debo's not 100%. McCaffrey's not 100%. I know he came back from injury, but he's still not 100%. The defense is missing their leader. The only trustworthy guy in that offense is George Kittle right now, because even the backup running backs are hurt too. Jordan Mason's been banged up a bit. Garendo's been hurt a little bit too. Moody, I think, got hurt too. I think at one point, the kicker. So, God forgive you for having a hurt kicker on the roster, right?
And he's had some bad games this season too.
He had a good week one. I won my fantasy with him week one, but I dropped him for Boswell, so I was okay with that. I know, right? So I don't know. I think. So after this game with Green Bay, I don't know what their remaining schedule is afterwards, but
I have it right here, Rick.
Because they were a good team last year, which means that I think they're still playing tough teams. No.
Yes, so I have the schedule right here. So they're facing the Packers this tomorrow. Following that, December 1st, Sunday Night Football in Buffalo. After that, 4 o'clock game, Sunday the 8th, at home against Chicago. Thursday night game, so quick turnaround after that Bears game. At home to take on the Rams. Then they're in Miami Sunday the 22nd to face the Dolphins. Then Monday Night Football, New Year's Eve, December 30th, at home against the Lions. And then the last week of the season, a flex game. We don't know when it'll happen, of course, but they face the Cardinals in Arizona. And again, this team, right now, the best they could do in division record-wise is go 500. They're 1-3 against the division this year so far.
Right. So, yeah, I mean, you still got a battle with the Lions, who will probably fight for the number 1 seed. The Cardinals, who are a surprising option for the NFC West at the moment. And, again, you know, the Dolphins are starting to play a little bit better, too. So, It's tough.
They face the Bills
right now, I think this,
Packers Bills back-to-back weeks, man, is tough.
Yeah, I mean, look, especially because, you know, the Bills just had that big win, too. They're firing on all cylinders, so it's tricky. And now, I can see them maybe having a bit of a comeback here and there. I mean, the game against the Rams, they could probably win that one. But, again, you know, when you're the top team in your conference and the top team in your division, your schedule's loaded with talent. And if you get hurt that following year, which they did, tricky to say that they'll be in good spots. So I worry if I'm a Niners fan. I don't know about them making it back here. And also, not to mention, they're, I think, a game and a half out of the last wild card spot, right? Because Washington's 7-4 and they're holding the 7th spot.
That is correct.
So you got to make up more than just one game because, you know, the Commanders still have their bye to play. You got to make up more than one game on them. So that's tricky in this league.
And we were talking, Rick, about how critical it is to start out the season well. The Minnesota Vikings 8-2. What that good start has done for Minnesota, it makes it nigh impossible. The Niners have to, honestly, more than the Bills game next week, although it'd be nice to get the upset there, they need to somehow beat Green Bay this week. They need to find a way.
I think the point that we're making, yeah, you're right. The Vikings hot start and the Commanders surprising start, it left such little wiggle room for messing up and for not playing well, because if you think about it now, the Vikings and Commanders, the Lions, the Eagles, the Packers even, what wildcard spots available? None. So you got to win the division, and in all likelihood, the way it's shaking out right now, the NFC West is going to be the 4 seed, taking on the top wild card. Because I think the NFC South, for all the trash that we give them, and we give them fair amounts of trash, and they deserve it. I think if it comes down to Atlanta and Arizona, I think Atlanta will have a better record and be a 3. And it doesn't mean they will be a better team, but they'll have a better record. So I think the way the tables have turned, the Niners last year were, you know, a handful of plays away from winning the Super Bowl, to this year, if they make it back, they're going to be the 4 seed playing Minnesota or Green Bay or Washington, maybe something like that in the first round. And that's a scary proposition for a team that's, again, going to be limping in. Like we talked about Miami a couple weeks ago with the coach hot seat meter, limping into the playoffs this year. San Francisco would be. Yeah,
and really it just feels like the only way they could get the postseason at this point is they need to win the division.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, again, Arizona's only a game up. They're 6-4, and the rest of the division is 5-5. So there's a pathway. But what did I just say? The rest of the division is 5-5.
Yeah.
It's not like Seattle's 2-8 and the Rams are 3-7. Everybody else is 5-5. Everybody else is gunning for that spot. So you got to leapfrog a lot of teams to get there. You got to win these games to get there. And I don't know if they're going to have the firepower to do so.
Yeah, and it's worth noting the Niners are technically 4th. The Niners are 4th right now in the division because all the other teams have a tiebreaker over them.
Exactly. Not a good scenario to be in for the Niners.
No, not good at all. Speaking of being last, well, maybe, I don't know if they're last or second to last in their division at the moment, Rick. This team just lost by like 4 scores and more again. 4 scores and more defeats for this team. Rick, how does Doug Peterson still have a job?
You're asking the wrong guy. I don't know.
The Jaguars just got absolutely whooped 52-6 against the Detroit Lions. The Lions have like 3 wins. I shared it as a joke on my story a couple weeks ago, but the Lions now have 3 wins this season of 38 points or more.
Yeah.
Absurd. Rick, we
It's
can look
wild.
at this. We can take it both ways. It was Mac Jones starting this game for the Jaguars, by the way, and he had an incredible stat line of 138 yards and 1 interception. Rick, what do you make of it on both sides? The Jaguars and their complete collapse of this 2024 campaign, and the Lions 9-1, looking like the best team in the NFC right now.
Yeah, I look at the Jaguars and I say to myself that this is just a massive downfall from where we thought they were going to be. I mean, last year was a surprise that the Texans won the division, and I thought, okay, well, Jacksonville's going to come back because, Lawrence is going to have a better season and they're going to be okay. And what's happened? The Jaguars have been absolute nothings because it's all about that. We can talk about Lawrence all we want, but the Jaguars' defense has been brutal this season. I mean, I love the guy, but Cole Kmet doesn't deserve to score 2 touchdowns on you in London. I'm sorry. Like, that should never happen. And the Jags secondary is porous. And that's a nice way of putting it. They're a disaster. So the Lions put up 52 is not a surprise because the Jaguars had no way to stop them on defense. Nothing. Nothing they did could work. Again, when you're trying to trade firepower with one of the best offenses in the game, you're going to lose a lot of times if you're not good enough. And look, we talked about it. Mac Jones is not an NFL quarterback. He's just not. 138 yards and interception is a Mac Jones typical quarterback line. He's just not that good. And so if I'm the Lions, here's the thing that I'll be interested in for this week for the Lions. Will they have a comeback to earth moment? Because you put up 52 points, you think everything's going well, you 600 yards offense, you're firing on all cylinders. Do you overestimate the next opponent that you have and maybe struggle in the very beginning of the game? Now, they might win that game still, but they could struggle because, all that offense, they're thinking we can do no wrong until they get punched back in the mouth. So, yeah, the Lions right now are the number 1 seed in the NFC. Good for them, but it's all about the next game. And again, that's a lot of coach speak, but it's the truth. For a team like this that is looking to get back to a point where they were so close last year and they just let it slip through their fingers, you have to focus on the next game if you're the Lions. You have to focus on the next opponent and just running your plays all over it because you're not going to win 52-6 every week out. The Lions maybe because they've done it 3 times this year already, but you're not supposed to win that way more than 3 times in a year, every single week.
Yeah, it's something to say at the very least. Detroit, that offense keeps on clicking, they keep on rolling. Honestly, they're doing good, and they've had some off games here. So it almost feels like that team could even hit another gear, which is a scary thought process to say the very least. So we'll see. We'll see how Detroit continues to go as they are really in a really good spot right now to have the top seed in the NFC locked in packed for them. And we talked about it before the season, Rick. You and I especially, we picked them as our 1 seed. Road to the Super Bowl in the NFC is going to run through Motor City.
Yep,
and that's a proposition to say the very least. Other results around the league that we're just going to make brief mention of them just because the Green Bay Packers won on a last-second block against the Chicago Bears. That's big for their playoff odds. And really considering this Niners game that we just talked about earlier, that's a big detriment to the Niners, the fact that the Bears couldn't get that upset to go their way. Miami Dolphins, a big win over the Raiders to keep their slim to none division hopes alive, but realistically some AFC wildcard hunt for them. Vikings, ugly win over the Tennessee Titans for themselves. The Saints beat the Browns. Taysom Hill had a massive game.
Yep.
So if you were a Taysom Hill fantasy owner and you actually started him last week, you probably won your matchup.
Yep.
The Denver Broncos absolutely smacked the Atlanta Falcons in Denver. Rick, let's talk about Dix. Let's talk about Bo Nix and his coming out party that game. 307 passing yards, 4 touchdowns for himself. We talked about Jaden Daniels, and it's kind of lockstep. He's the favorite, and it's the offensive rookie of the year assist to lose. Bo Nix is going to try here in the second half. What are you seeing, Rick? I think we could both agree with this, but what are we seeing from Bo Nix in the second half of the season that's starting to see him really be so different from that guy who started the season with 0 touchdown passes through his first 3 games?
I think he's trusting the offense a little bit more. I think he's trusting his receivers and his running backs, and I think he's getting more comfortable. Look, Bo Nix was the oldest rookie coming into this season. He was an older guy. He a little more seasoned out of college, and he's in a good system. I mean, Sean Payton's offense, when it works, is a beautiful thing. It needed to work, and that was the issue, was that because Nix was a rookie, he was kind of a little on the unsure of himself side to make sure that he's a lot better. His weapons are coming back into play for him. I think his running back room, is doing very well for him. I know Audric Estime, who is a rookie of the
Rick is trying to praise the Denver Broncos here, and just Suffolk County is not letting him, it seems, to say the very least. But no, to what Rick was saying there, ladies and gentlemen, the confidence of Bo Nix, the connection and chemistry of his weapons, and really kind of understanding things, and maybe that a little bit more of rapport with Sean Payton is really the ultimate deciding factor as to why there is more success in Denver with Bo Nix right now. Because this is the biggest thing for me. Bo Nix. Rick, as you were continuing your point there, Bo Nix this season, 6 interceptions. 4 of them came in the first 2 weeks. He has only thrown 2 interceptions ever since week 3 of the season, which was highlighted by that big 26-7 upset win against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Again, it's just like, it works. He's working really well. He's working really hard to get into the right offensive mindset. I feel like he's understanding the play calling a lot more. That's a big key for him. So to be able to understand the play calling and to be able to understand how to work Sean Payton's offense is a godsend. I mean, look, I dropped Cortland Sutton at one point in fantasy because he wasn't catching touchdowns, because Bo Nix wasn't throwing touchdowns. But now Sutton and the rest of those receivers that are out there are feasting. And again, I think Denver is the 7th seed right now, which is not a sentence that I thought I would ever say, because it's surprising to see them doing very well. But that's a testament to Sean Payton's offense and, again, how good this defense is being. And when that defense can put confidence into a rookie quarterback and say, we got your back, if you turn the ball over, we're going to come right back down the field and force a 3 and out, or force a quick turnover of our own. It gives them confidence to get back out there and keep working at it. And again, Nix is a good quarterback. I think he was drafted in the right spot for him, because I feel like, Denver just knows how to work with that younger quarterback room. And again, Peyton's offense is just outstanding for him. You do feel bad for Zach Wilson, because he's never going to see the field ever again. But, that's good.
Yeah. So it's going to be very interesting to see how Denver can keep up this hot start, because like you mentioned, Rick, we mentioned with the NFC. Let's look at the AFC here really fast. The wild card picture there. 5th seed right now is the Chargers, Jim Harbaugh. 6th seed is the Ravens, John Harbaugh.
Yep.
And 7th seed is the Broncos. No Harbaugh, but Sean Payton. So it's going to take a big second half run from some of these teams below them, between the Colts, the Dolphins, and the Bengals, and maybe the Jets, to try to make a run at things here. And obviously, a couple heartbreaking losses here, Rick, between the Bengals and the Jets. A 34-27 loss for the Bengals in Los Angeles, despite the fact that Jamar Chase and Joe Burrow had yet another game, man. 356 passing yards, 3 touchdowns for Burrow. Higgins had 148 yards and a touchdown, worth noting. But Jamar Chase, 75 yards and 2 grabs. One and clinched me my 7th win of the fantasy season for that. So thank you, Jamar Chase. The Jets 27-28 fall to the Indianapolis Colts. Rodgers gets did he fumble at the very end, or was it just the sack on the last drive, Rick, that basically ended things for the Jets on the last gasp for them, that maybe they could have or could have not have done something, at least getting field goal or Hail Mary range. But ultimately at the end, 2 disappointing losses. Rick, if you think either team has any hope for the remainder of the season, who would you lean towards to make a run in the second half, Rick? The Jets or the Bengals?
Bengals. Come on, why are you asking that question? Just no hope.
Just
none
one
whatsoever. No hope. No.
Both teams are on their bye week this week.
That very fair point, but you pointed something out that's very important here. The Bengals offense is working, with Burrow and with Chase and Higgins and even Chase Brown. It's working. It's just the defense needs to come back around and be better. There's no hope for the Jets. None. Like, you saw it on that last drive. Like what play calling and what execution leads you to believe the Jets have any hope and any chance to do anything this year? None. So the only thing with Cincinnati is that they need to catch up in a hurry because, again, Pittsburgh and Baltimore are running this division. And you mentioned the teams, also the Chargers and the Broncos. I think the Broncos are, if I'm not mistaken, maybe 2.5 games up right now on them. Possibly could be 3 if they win this week. So, Cincinnati's got to hurry up and make this happen. But they're the team that I would take that would have more hope of the two, to be honest.
Yeah.
Like, no Jets. No Jets. The fact that the Jets were even in the, quote, playoff hunt is a crime against media truthiness.
He's not wrong, ladies and gentlemen. But of course, we go by mathematical probabilities and the such. So there is that. A couple other results just to make note of in Week 11, Rick. The Bills, massive win over the Chiefs. They end the Chiefs' bid at an undefeated season. The Bills very firmly cemented in the second seed in the AFC right now. The Chiefs still number 1. Depending on how the season could go, maybe the Bills could be trying to threaten to make the AFC run through Buffalo. You never know. So that is worth noting. You mentioned we kind of made somewhat of an allusion to when we talked about the Niners and their injuries, but they did lose to Seattle and Geno Smith. So his Ring of Honor case re-strengthens itself with a big road division win against San Fran. The Rams defeated the Patriots. That happened. The Eagles defeated the Commanders last week on Thursday night. That was a big win that the Eagles needed to make a little bit of distance between themselves and the Commanders in the hunt for the NFC crown or the NFC East crown. These two teams are going to be facing each other in a couple weeks' time. Is it week 13 or 14 where that's at? I think it might be. It's later in the season. I think it's week 14. Yeah, it doesn't matter. But ultimately, these two teams are going to face again in short order, and that could very well be the deciding game for who's going to be the NFC East winner for this season. So we have that. Rick, last thing we're going to talk about. The duality of Pittsburgh football. Defensive stalwart game against the Baltimore Ravens. You limit them to 16 points. Chris Boswell, 6 field goals. And the Pittsburgh Steelers in Pittsburgh defeat the Baltimore Ravens, taking the lead in the division. And you have this momentum. You're facing a 2-win team on Thursday Night Football. So naturally, the Cleveland Browns in Cleveland defeated the Pittsburgh Steelers. Final score 24-19. In a game that very quickly became a snow game. It started out decent, but then the snow fell. And Russell Wilson, 270 yards and a touchdown. The running game, while there was a rushing touchdown, it was decent. It was all hands on deck in that performance. 45 yards for Warren, 41 yards for Najee Harris. Justin Fields got in there for a couple rushes. He had 26 yards on 3 carries. Calvin Austin had a receiving touchdown for himself. But ultimately, the Cleveland Browns won out. The defense hunkered down for Cleveland when they really need them to. Myles Garrett had 3 sacks. So our defensive player of the year conversation might need to be adjusted going forward there. And while Cleveland's offense was not perfect, they were critical when they needed to. They converted on every 4th down in that game that they needed to, Rick. What do you make of Browns' victory for the Steelers?
It's what we talk about all the time with classic divisional matchups. The AFC North is 4 teams that go to war with each other regularly, and it becomes ugly and it's slugfests and surprises happen. I mean, both of those games, if you look at them, were upset picks. The Steelers were not favored against the Ravens, and they won that game. And then the Browns were not favored against the Steelers, and they won that game. So it just tells you that the AFC North is just completely topsy-turvy at all times, But again, the weather might have played a big factor into it, but let's talk about this. The Steelers are putting up points by special teams and defense. It doesn't matter that Russell Wilson started the game 7 of 7 against the Browns. That offense is still a little bit lackluster at best. For a team that has, I think they have 8 wins now, right? It's a big question mark, I think. What do you always say? Can they stay consistent? Can they stay relevant? If you have a good enough offense, which they don't have, it's tough to say that they're going to continue that run. So we'll see. It'll be interesting for Pittsburgh going down the stretch here, but I feel like now you're getting to a point where you're getting to the nitty-gritty, and you have to decide whether you're going to go with Wilson or Justin Fields permanently and hope that the offense picks things up because, if it's just a Chris Boswell show, it's not going to happen that way.
Yeah. Yeah, and look, despite the fact that Rick and I, as Chris Boswell fantasy owners, would love more Chris Boswell 5 field goal games
Oh yeah.
for your team, you need a little bit more offensive production. And I mentioned the running game while it was all hands on deck and while they finished with good yardage. I really don't like the fact that the Steelers of all teams don't have a bell cow back that they could truly rely on.
Well, listen, breaking news for you, just so you're aware of this. I've made this decision now. Since we are doing another wheel spin at the end of the year because I hate the Jets, if it lands on the Pittsburgh Steelers, I will be getting a Chris Boswell jersey.
Yes.
Very simple. Very simple. Because he's been the stud that my fantasy team has needed for the entire run of the season. But yeah, and you're right. It's very hard to justify the Steelers not having a strong running back contingent to be able to, say, oh, give me more yards, give me more of this. They're not doing it at the moment. So that's where it's kind of a little questionable.
Yeah, to say the very least. Rick, before we do move on here, because we are slowly reaching the end of the show, and it looks like Justin is going to be unable to join us, unfortunately. For yourself, Rick, in your opinion, I know we kind of glossed over it because we did mention the win, but the Bills defeating the Chiefs, ending their undefeated season, like we mentioned, what do you think? I could build the schedules for both of them here in a moment if you want, one at a time. Would you lean towards the Bills maybe taking the top spot in the AFC away from the Chiefs for the postseason, or do you still think Kansas City, is this loss the wake-up call they need to kind of start to play a little bit better football?
Well, so that's my question, a duality question there too. Is there a scenario where the Bills could clinch the division this week?
I don't believe so. Let me look at because I believe the Bills, do they have a bye week this week? I think this is the Bills' bye week.
Okay.
I would imagine the only way would be if the Patriots defeated the Dolphins, because that would drop the Dolphins to 4-7.
Yeah. Buffalo's already 9-1, so
yes.
All right. I mean, well, I guess that's my only thing here is that, but the only question mark that I would have for Buffalo being the number 1 seed is when they clinch the division. Like, when exactly do they do that? Because I feel like once they do that, they're going to start taking their foot off the gas pedal a little bit more, because it's not, again, learn from the mistakes of your division compadres. Learn from Bradley Chubb getting hurt in week 17 last year,
Yeah.
If you don't need to win 15 games, don't win 15 games. If they're go 10-1 and 10-1 gets in the division, I can see them finishing 13-4 or 14-3. The Chiefs, on the other hand, because the Chargers are still relevant and the Broncos are making a play, I feel like they need a little bit more in order to save themselves from the anguish of losing the division here. So that's my thing. If the Bills clinch the division early, I think that's going to decide to favor the Chiefs, because the Chiefs have more meaningful games down the stretch than the Bills are already in the playoffs, so they can kind of take James Cook out for a game, and treat him to a platter of buffalo wings instead of putting him out there, in the snow game. Why not?
Yeah, to say the very least. And it is also worth noting, I mean, you mentioned the odds of winning the division. I think it's going to ultimately have to come down to, are the fellow teams in the division going to be losing? Because over the next 2 games, because this is the Bills bye week, the Bills are taking on 2 NFC teams here in the Niners and the Rams. So that'll help in the win and loss column overall, but that doesn't directly correlate to any significant tiebreakers per se that their opponents could have.
Well, that's true. That's true. But again, at the same time, too, if the Dolphins stumble here or there, if they lose the game and get to 8 losses, and the Bills win and they're 10, the worst the Bills could do is 10-7. So that would easily clinch that, because the Patriots aren't winning this division, and the Jets aren't winning it either. Come on now.
Yeah, you're not wrong. You're not wrong at all. So time will tell here, but Buffalo, there are odds there. There are odds. And if Kansas City has another bad game or 2 in the remainder of their schedule, it can most certainly happen for themselves. Just a quick look at the Chiefs' schedule here. They face the Panthers this week, so there's that in Carolina. They're at home for 2 weeks to take on the Raiders and the Chargers. So realistically, there's a chance. I mean, talk about clinching divisions. The Chargers, the Chiefs, if they could win the next couple of games, they could clinch the division by midway through December. Depending on if the Chargers also drop a game or 2 here and there as well. So time will tell. We could see both these teams clinching their divisions by the midway point of December, and that'd make for some very interesting football going into the holiday season.
For sure. I listen. Nothing makes the holidays better than more interesting football games.
Yes, and of course, nothing makes the football games interesting for us like the hashtag SAOC pick challenge, ladies and gentlemen. The challenge where in theory, Justin and I would go through the NFL slate of games and pick our games from a 4-to-1 point scale, 4 being our most confident selection, 1 being our least confident. As we go through the slate, we must all pick at least one upset pick. Highest it could be is our 2-point pick, or lowest it could be, is our 2-point pick. We can make all upsets if we so did choose to do so in the span of a week in that regard. And we can't pick a tie if we so choose, but it must be used with our 4-point pick, which gets upgraded to a 5-point pick. And of course, I mentioned we go serpentine order based on the order of the point standings for the pick challenge coming into our respective week. And all the lines to us, who's favored, who is the underdog going into the week, are brought to us by our friends at Say With Us People. ESPN Bet. Beautiful. Now, Rick, I'm in a bit of a moral quandary here. Because Justin's not here.
Correct.
He's unable to join us for the show, which is unfortunate. I did read back in the group chat. We did confirm we were doing a show today.
Yeah.
So there's that. I did send the link to the show to the both of you.
Yep.
So I'm in a quandary because I've mentioned the pick challenge. We could, in theory, just do it behind the scenes for ourselves. But he could have showed up. So I don't know.
So here's I have 2 possible thoughts of how we're gonna accomplish this. By the way, I'm gonna join you on video since I arrived at my destination. So hey people, how we doing? Yeah, here we go. All right, so option A is we make all the picks, including his. You pick 2 games for him, and I pick 2 games for him.
Mm-hmm.
Option B is we pick the 8 games that we're going to pick and leave him with his 4 and make him decide
which he wants to go from 4 to 1.
Exactly.
Okay.
So, I mean, I guess the question is, how morally repugnant are we today?
Well, remember, before we came up with the idea of this season of, hey, whenever one of us is going to miss a show, we do this beforehand. But we didn't think that was going to be the case this week.
Correct.
So remember, there was a week last year where Justin made all of his picks before a show, and we were just stuck with the remainder.
That's true.
So I will say this: no matter which way we go, Rick, I think I'd say executive decision, but I want to get your sign off on it. I mentioned that to make things very interesting this week, because there's 12 exact games for us to pick, and the Gopher has to normally get games. We pick. I think the Gopher should automatically go against Justin's games for himself. So if Justin, whether it's he decides the order or we decide it for him, whatever his 4-point pick is, if he misses it, the Gopher gets those 4 points.
You know what? I think that's a good idea. I like that idea. I do.
So I think automatically for a penalty for missing this program, Justin will automatically go head-to-head with the Gopher for this week.
I like it. I guess nothing would make Justin more angry than losing all of his games, having the Gopher win all the games.
Oh, jeez.
So.
Oh my goodness. So. I don't know. I'm still torn because I do, to an extent, I feel bad, but also he's not here.
Well, again, there was confirmation that we were going to do this show, and he has not arrived, and he did not give us, a heads up last night that he wasn't going to be able to do it, or that this morning that hey XYZ, I'm not available for it. Regardless, though, I did give you the standings, and I do have my 4-point pick already in place. So if you want to at least get that out of the way, we can start that challenge up. So
yeah, we can. I'll go through the standings, but real quick, which do you think? Should we leave it up to him? I'm leaning towards leave it up to him of how he wants to go through his 4-to-1. So we just leave the 4 games left for him.
So in order to not keep anybody in suspense, I would say let's leave it up to him. But if by 4:00 this afternoon he hasn't made his picks,
privately behind the scenes we will do it
for
him. Okay,
agreed.
Okay. And for confirmation for the people, this was the text exchange. Rick said, if it's Saturday, I'll be on the road, maybe in the car with Duncan as per my punishment. Do you have Duncan in the car?
So I was not able to get it. However, I will promise you that the next time that I will be able to get it, I already made my decision on the drink. I have not decided my food yet, but it will be a matcha latte because that just looks hideous.
You should get that picture I sent to you and Justin, Rick, of the
the cream cheese with bagel on top of it. Yeah.
Yes. Excuse me, sir. You put some bagel in my cream cheese.
Terrible.
Justin did say he was goody for day, and then you confirmed you could do today. So just one second. All right. Pick standings for the people. Here are the tallies. I am first place by a small margin. I have a 3-point lead over Justin. I have 82 points after last week. I hit on my 4 and my 3, but my 2 and my 1 missed. Justin has 79 points. I think he missed on his 2-point upset, but he did get his 1-pointer. So that was a +1 in the margin for him. Rick, I think you built your lead against the Gopher a little bit here, if I'm not mistaken. You have 60 points now.
Well, so the Gopher only had 1 game last week, and it was the Kansas City Buffalo game. Gopher went with the Chiefs, and we spun the wheel, and it was only a 2 times multiplier. So, yeah, he had 0 points. And I did very well. If I had just not picked the Jets at 1-pointer, I would have had a perfect week. But, yes, I'm at 60 now. So I'm very happy that I'm further away. And I'll continue to build that lead with my 4-point pick this week.
Yes, and so let's not leave it for suspense. Rick, your 4-point pick belongs to you.
I mean, it's the Chiefs. You know, if even if they were 10-0 going into this week, they were going to win this game no matter what. It's the Chiefs against the Panthers. Come on now. If Carolina wins this game, they might as well go to World War III all over again. So give me Kansas City at 4.
Yeah, I don't blame you whatsoever for that, to say the very least. All right, my pick then. It seems with my 4-point pick. There are some other wide margins this week, and I'm very torn between what to pick with, because I feel like some of these games with wide margins is very upset laced, right? The Podfather's been lost. Oh my goodness! We have did a mascot come in? Did Justin was Justin tailing the Podfather on this trek the entire time? Has Justin secretly been in the background this entire time? No, he's actually been not.
No, so actually that helped me out, because I didn't have my picks set, so I had to go find them for a moment. So
there we go.
I have them now, so we're good.
Beautiful. All right, I will go with my 4-point pick. Give me the Houston Texans for my 4-pointer. I think Texans big. Even though they're in a comfortable spot in the division, they've had some shaky games. It would be big of the Texans to be able to get a victory over the Titans this week. So give me them for my 4-pointer. And for my 3-point selection, I want to pick this team, but I think they might be available come my 1-pointer, because I think they'll win, but I'm iffy on performance. Give me. That's a tempting pick as well. No, this is a lot tougher than. I think this is an interesting and tough week, to say the very least.
Yeah.
Really visit. See, the Cowboys are such a complicated team, because what if this is the week where they finally get it together, right?
Yeah, it could be. You never know.
Yeah. I will go with, for my 4-point selection. Yeah, I'm going to go with a road team here to get a victory. They need this to stay in the hunt in the division. Rick, are you still there?
I'm here.
Okay. All right. For my 3-point pick, this team needs this win to stay in the division hunt. The division leader lost last week. Give me the Tampa Bay Buccaneers over the Giants.
That's fair. That is a very fair selection. I was actually going to consider that by 3 as well, if you didn't take that one, to be honest. But that frees me up to do the obvious pick. And I just want to point out, too, that Justin being down by 3, this is a very bad week for him to miss.
Yeah, seriously.
Yeah.
If he doesn't respond to us by 4 p.m., it's tough to let us decide.
I'm going to take the Lions to my 3-pointer. That's another big spread. So that locks me into an upset with my 2, and I have 4 upsets to choose from. At least I think I do. I don't know. What is the Seattle-Arizona line, Jerk? Out of curiosity.
It's Arizona -1.
Yeah. Okay. Because on the other side that I also do, Arizona's -0.5. So I'm going to stay away from that one. I'm going to take an interesting upset here, because I feel like this is a game that they're not going to win. I'm going to take the Chargers over the Ravens at 2 points for an upset, because I feel like the Ravens, they confuse me, and I feel like this is also a week where, the one thing that happens when the Steelers don't win a game is that if the Ravens have to make ground, they fall flat on their face. And so that would be that, because the Chargers, I think, are firing on all the right cylinders. Plus, J.K. Dobbins' revenge game, anybody? So give me the Chargers over the Ravens at 2.
I don't blame you at all there, Rick. I do not blame you at all. So this leads me to my selection. I need to go with a upset pick here. It's a little bit tough because the thing is, to me, there are some games here that I think are very much upset worthy, but it's not the highest of confidence that I think they're upset worthy. If Purdy was the starter, I would probably lean towards a San Francisco selection here, but he's just not. So I think it's very tough to say the very least. You know what? This is I think this is a little bit bold to say the very least. Give me the Chicago Bears for my 2-point upset pick.
Ooh, that's one of the games that I picked this week as an upset as well. Yeah, so I don't blame you.
Because they're earmarked, they've had a bad stretch recently, but eventually that offense needs to get rolling. And Minnesota hasn't looked the most impressive here.
Right.
Ever since their torrid start to the season, very close games against the Jaguars and the Titans. And this Bears defense is solid. So there's that. And then with my 1-point selection, look, I'm going to keep it simple. This team needs to continue to get wins to keep their playoff hunt alive. Just give me the Miami Dolphins. They're in Miami. Those games tend to be the best for them in regards to facing the Patriots. And simple as put, they need this win. So give me the Dolphins with my 1-point pick.
Yeah, that's a fair shout there. All right, so for my 1-pointer for this week, remind me again of who Philadelphia is playing this week.
They're playing the Rams in Los Angeles.
Ooh, in LA is a tricky one.
You still, Rick, the Commanders game is still up for grabs. I know we're like a bit concerned about if this could be the Dallas week, but to be fair, it's now a 1-point selection, whereas we're hesitant for
but I'm not picking it for a reason. Remember, prior to the season is when I make my picks, and prior to the season, Dak wasn't hurt, and the Cowboys stadium wasn't collapsing in on itself, much like the team is. So,
fair.
You know what? I'm going to take that low grade upset for my 1-pointer that I was looking at. Give me Seattle over Arizona.
Okay.
It's not a big upset. It's not a high bar, but again, if I'm Arizona, you win this game, you prove your worth as a team that, and honestly, they might, if they win this game, they might go up by 2 games on the rest of the division. But I just don't know if they have the stones for it, especially in the interdivision matchups. So give me Seattle and the future Ring of Honor candidate himself, Geno Smith.
Boom, there it is. So we have made our selections. So this means and confirms these 4 games are what are available for Justin and for the Gopher to go against him this week. Packers, Niners, neither of us selected that game. Cowboys, Commanders, neither of us selected that game. That's the only game I think I would go back and maybe have had more strong feelings on, but that game, Broncos, Raiders.
Interesting. Okay.
And Eagles, Rams.
Yeah.
So
not a lot of good upset selections there, because I believe the upset picks for those games would be
the Niners,
Raiders,
the Cowboys,
the Niners,
the Raiders, and the Rams.
Yeah. Ugh. I'll be honest with you, I think doubly, if he doesn't pick by 4:00, we should just give him all favorites and make him have another penalty this week.
the first ever non upset selection penalty in show history.
Why not?
That happened. All right, well, ladies and gentlemen, that was this week's discombobulated #SAOC pick challenge. Hopefully next week it'll be more, although next week will be concise because it's Thanksgiving, so we will record hopefully beforehand. We'll decide that behind the scenes, people, so don't you worry about that. So this week's #SAOC pick challenge comes to an end. So Justin's selections will be recapped next week. Myself, I went 4-point Texans, 3-point the Buccaneers, 2-point the Bears, and 1-point the Dolphins. Rick, recap your selections for the people real quick.
What did I even do? Oh, yes. Kansas City at 4, Detroit at 3, the Chargers at 2, and the Seahawks at 1.
There we go. And Justin's available games will be decided behind the camera. Now, last, but of course, very not least, this is the original fan favorite segment of the people, ladies and gentlemen. So without much further ado, Rick, you can start going if you do want to. Our tickers and graphics are so muddled here that it's taking me.
I think it's because I'm on the road. I think because I was signed in as you.
There we are.
There we go. Let me run through this because I got some good ones here this week actually. Although if I remember most of them, you know what? I'm going to give you a short podium this week of just my number one thing. AMC movie theaters. Why are you trying to silence people if they want to sing along to Wicked Part 1? Like, we all know the story of it if you've seen it live on Broadway. You're not missing much because Ariana Grande is a terrible singer anyways. So, you're not missing much. If they want to sing along, let them sing along. It's whatever. That's what the show is made for, is singing along to the songs. But you're saying, please silence yourself and don't sing along to the movie theaters. No, you're going to get people to sing along after you because obviously they're going to do what they're going to do and they're going to, make sure that that is what they decide to do. So it's stupid to suggest that. It's stupid to make that a rule, and you should be ashamed of yourself for doing so. And my other surprise point pick here, I hope QT Marshall wins tonight at 0 hour, because I can't stand Big Justice or the chocolate cookie. I don't stand that. And I hope that when he wins, he crumbles a cookie in front of Big Justice's face to make him cry, because I hate children.
Where the best wrestle. Yeah, sure.
They went wrestle at Costco,
Oh, Lord, that's something to say at the very least. But with that being said, ladies and gents, thank you for joining us on this very interesting edition of the #SAOC podcast. Not ideal recording circumstances. This harkens me back to the first season where there was that one episode, it was just me and Justin, where weather and terrible internet connection just marred the program. I think both Justin and I cut off at 3 different instances at some point. So this is a throwback to that, a throwback to the Podfather on the road. Just a big episode. But we did go over some big NFL topics this week. We discussed Daniel Jones and the Giants' separation of ways. We talked about the wide span of the NFL and the implications of the playoff picture, the Niners' injuries and what they need to do, the Bills challenging the Chiefs for the top seed, how does Doug Peterson still have a job, and many more things. And of course, look, this show connects stuff. And we mentioned early in the season, Rick, how important early wins would be, and that's coming into fruition.
Yep.
We mentioned with a couple teams like the Vikings and the Commanders in the NFC, now for the Broncos in the AFC. The wild card hunt is going to heat up in the NFL. It's extremely exciting. We hope that you all join us on this path as it continues. And as I once again have access to it, ladies and gentlemen, sending us off will be our beautiful countdown video to end the show. We'll bring it back next week at the start of the show. Thank you for joining us on this week's edition. We'll see you all next week for our Thanksgiving breakdowns for the NFL games and our Thanksgiving selections. Early thanks. We'll see you all before that, but early Thanksgiving to you all. Mazel tov, and have a good